I want to talk about terms of trade. This shows how much we get for our exports. So really, how many imports we can purchase by selling our exports. Um, Obviously, if you export and import, what do you get with all that labour, all that production? What can you earn a lot? Obviously, the terms of trade for Americans are very favourable. If you look at the terms of trade, maybe for I don't know Bangladesh, what they have to do to obtain American produce and services is probably a lot. We've got an index to see what our terms of trade are like, and normally we look at them and compare them with another year's. We can say it's favourable if it increases, the terms of trade increase, and it's unfavourable if it increases. So if it increases, less exports are being exchanged for the imports. If it decreases and it's unfavourable, more exports must be exchanged for imports. The terms of trade index is exports divided by imports times 100. And then you can see the movements, whether there's a favourable movement or an unfavourable. What causes a favourable movement? Obviously, the rise in export prices relative to import prices. So that's important, relative. Maybe they're both going up, but if export prices are going up faster, then it's going to be favourable. And why? That might be because of more demand for exports. So we might be putting up our prices because demand's going up, and or less for imports, or maybe imports demand is going up even less quick, shall we say. Maybe the exchange rates are changing because of government policy. Remember, if it's if the US dollar becomes cheaper because the exchange rate changes and it becomes cheap, that could cause a favourable term of trade. That would mean imports are cheaper and exports will be earning more money. Or maybe you've got inflation in domestic products. If there's an inflation in domestic products, you're getting more money for your produce. What about the causes of unfavourable terms of trade? So here we've got again a rise in import prices relative to export prices. Again, they can be both going up, but if import prices are going up faster, you're going to have an unfavourable terms of trade. You're getting less for your produce, for what you produce. And that can be because of more demand for imports and less for exports. That's why prices go up. Demand pull inflation. Or maybe again the exchange rate changes from government policy. Here maybe the American dollar becomes more expensive, and so imports are more expensive, and exports are cheaper for the Americans. So that would cause an unfavourable terms of trade. Or you could have inflation in foreign products. Now, the impact of these changes in terms of trade, for a favourable movement, If it's because of demand for exports has increased, it's beneficial. So if we think, the reason prices for our exports are going up is because they're being demanded more by foreigners, that could be a beneficial reason. But if it's the costs which are pushing up the export prices, it can be harmful, because that could mean, we're not getting any extra money. Maybe we're paying more for energy or something, and maybe that will be reducing the demand for our products too. So that impact could be harmful. For an unfavourable movement, it could actually be favourable. It could actually be a good thing for the current account deficit in the balance of payments. If, for example, we sell a lot less to China and China sells a lot more to us, by having an unfavourable movement, it will mean that maybe we can rebalance this. Maybe the Chinese will find the exports cheaper, and maybe we'll find their produce more expensive. So it could balance itself a little bit. Here, also, elasticity of demand is important. So if the export and import prices are elastic, it should increase export revenue relative to import expenditure, because demand will go up. If your prices are going down, the export price is going down, foreigners will be buying more, and we'll be buying less. But then if it's inelastic, you've got the opposite. Maybe you're actually getting even less revenue, because the prices are going down and people aren't changing their habits anyway. So lastly, I want to talk about the limitations of absolute and comparative advantage. Why? Well, let's remember these advantages are the fundamental reasons why we trade in a free market. These dynamics of the free market tends to go towards free trade because of these advantages. But some governments might want to avoid over-specialisation. Remember, by having an absolute or comparative advantage, we will be specialising more and more, and governments may prefer to avoid that. For example, in Turin, we specialised a lot in car production, but that really meant we depended on the car industry, which was risky. If the car industry has a bad patch, suddenly the whole city is having a bad patch. So it's good to have more alternative industries like food and like tourism, etc. And so governments may want to maybe avoid this specialisation and put limits, on it. So high transport costs might offset the comparative advantage. By the way, just to say, to avoid over-specialisation, they could be subsidising tourism. They did this a lot in the years where Ryanair was so cheap to fly to Turin, because the government was subsidising it. They wanted to increase the tourism industry. High transport costs, yes, this would mean comparative advantage wouldn't there wouldn't be a comparative advantage, so there wouldn't be the specialisation, because obviously suddenly you're having to spend a lot of money to transport the final goods around. So in the end, we may find it's cheaper to produce them here, or it's better for everyone to produce more in your home country near the market. This could be a problem. At the moment we've got higher and higher costs of energy, of transport, and more restricted possibility to transport things around with the supply problems, the scarcity of drivers, lorry drivers, etc. So this may ruin this comparative advantage and may mean we start producing more at home and importing less, and exporting less too. The exchange rate, yeah, let's remember there are opportunity cost ratios when we've got comparative advantage. There are these opportunity cost ratios where you're giving up producing a certain good to produce another one, and the other country's doing so too, and the exchange rate for the products should be beneficial to everybody if it lies between these opportunity cost ratios, but it may not lie between, and so that may reduce the advantage of the trade. Other governments may impose trade restrictions. So one big problem is you can't dictate to other governments. Maybe they decide for their reasons to protect their workers, or maybe because they think they can get advantage through imposing barriers, etc., and they decide to put trade restrictions. We've seen this happen with Trump, for example, decided to put lots of restrictions on many countries, even the European Union, because he thought it would really benefit the American worker. So that could be a limit to absolute and comparative advantage. This determination, this will of other governments to impose their trade restrictions, it needs to be reciprocal. If another government is imposing trade restrictions, then we must do too. Otherwise, you'll just lose work without protecting any of your businesses.